Former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey has kicked up a huge political and social media storm in India. During an interview to an American YouTube channel, Jack Dorsey was asked if, as the Twitter boss, he had faced any pressure from foreign governments. This was Dorsey's reply, and I quote, "India, for example, is one of the countries which had many requests around farmers' protests, around particular journalists who were critical of the government, and it manifested in ways such as we will shut Twitter down in India, we will raid the homes of your employees," which they did. "We will shut down your offices if you don't follow our instructions." And this is India, a democratic country, Dorsey said. Jack Dorsey, who quit as the Twitter CEO in 2021, also mentioned governments in Turkey and Nigeria which had restricted the platform in their countries over the years. As soon as the interview surfaced, the government of India launched a swift rebuttal and a scathing attack on Jack Dorsey. Union IT Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar lashed out, terming the remarks an outright lie by Jack Dorsey, fiction and an attempt to redact a dubious period of Twitter's history. He said Twitter had weaponized information against Indians and the government. Rajiv Chandrasekhar went on to argue the government of India has consistently maintained that any platform, whether foreign or Indian, small or big, must comply with Indian laws if they are to operate in India. Twitter was in repeated and continuous violation of Indian law, and the Dorsey Twitter regime had a problem accepting the sovereignty of the Indian law. It behaved as if the laws of India did not apply to it. The minister went on to say such was the level of partisan behavior by Twitter under the Jack regime that they had a problem removing misinformation from the platform in India when they did it themselves when similar events took place in the United States. No one was raided or sent to jail. Our focus was only on ensuring compliance with Indian laws and removal of misinformation from the platform because it had the potential to further inflame a situation based on fake news. Many other union ministers and BJP leaders also came out all guns blazing against Jack Dorsey. Remember, thousands of farmers across India held year-long protests that finally ended in November 2021 after Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the withdrawal of 3 controversial farm laws. At the time, many Twitter handles were suspended or banned, and some activists like Disha Ravi were arrested as well. The Congress and many other opposition parties have launched a blistering attack on the BJP-led government, saying Jack Dorsey's comments are further proof of the government weakening India's democracy. Congress spokesperson Supriya Shrinate said, "The real face of the cowardly dictator and the oppressive government will be exposed. We demand that the government stop suppressing social media and coaxing large sections of the media into submission." Shiv Sena MP Priyanka Chaturvedi tweeted, and I quote, "They tried to defame the movement. They called farmers terrorists and anti-nationals. They lathi charged the farmers. They let farmers die. They tried to silence the opposition in parliament. They tried to arm twist social media platforms to mute the voices of those supporting the farmers, but despite their might, despite their power, the farmers humbled their arrogance and forced the government to withdraw the Farmers Act. Indian democracy or rule of modiocracy?" Unquote. As this war of words between the former Twitter chief and the government of India gives way to a political war in the country, the question we're asking is this: is censorship on and off the social media a real threat to democracies today? Was Twitter dismissive about India's IT laws and the spread of fake news, or has the government been guilty of suppressing dissent? In this age of digital media, have the lines between freedom of expression and misinformation on the one hand and crackdown on fake news and muzzling of criticism and dissent on the other significantly blurred? Jack Dorsey has kicked up quite a storm. He says India is one of those countries that made many requests around farmers' protests, especially particular journalists who were critical of the government, and it manifested in ways such as "we will shut Twitter down in India, we will raid the homes of your employees, we will shut down your offices if you don't follow our rules." Now, I know that the government of India is saying this is an outright lie, but many are seeing this as a very strong indictment of the policy of the government of India, considering that we do pride ourselves on being the largest democracy in the world. The question really is, why do you think Jack Dorsey is lying about all this, as Rajiv Chandrasekhar, the union minister, has said?
Neha, in fact, who would know about Jack Dorsey and Twitter better than me, because I have filed cases against them. I am contested cases against them. They are having a lot of criminal prosecution in India. And my client had made a representation to Government of India, and subsequently the pressure was brought in on the government also. And Jack Dorsey is on record, and this is a part of the record which I am saying in the court, that he is a leftist and he says my organization is dominated by leftists and we generally recruit leftists. And therefore, this is a part of record which I have placed it. And therefore, I know their entire working. And they make money out of anti-India activities. An organization called Sikh for Justice, which is a banned organization in India. There, if you look at their tweets, they had the guns, were talking about Khalistan. They were trying to, and all of the tweets were about breaking India. And their leader, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, was the one who was actually leading this. And lot of violence was being promoted. And they were advertised on Twitter and they were making money out of anti-India activity. Very serious, let me tell you. And a very dangerous trend that was being set up out there. The news of fake genocide in India, which was there on their own during the farmers' protests, which they had done. Lot of misinformation, promoting, certain handles according to their own likes and dislikes, de-amplifying, deplatforming according to their own whimsical. They were so, secretive about everything. In fact, their own officers in India, if you look at their private Twitter handles, which I have placed them on record in the court, was anti-India. They were promoting and actively participating in creating anarchy. Most of them resigned even before the Twitter changed hand. Look at the Twitter files which came off when Elon Musk took it over. What happened there? And the kind of discrimination they had done in India. Forget about discrimination, it can be handled. But the anti-India activities from which they were making money, of which I have put it on record, they in fact were not even following the laws in India. They refused to appoint nodal officers when the ethics rules of 2021 came into the picture. For 2 years, they were dilly-dallying. They had no grievance officer, resident grievance or grievance officer in India. So many violations. See, democracy runs on established rules of law. If Government of India has formulated or Indian Parliament has made those rules, it has to be obeyed. If you have a problem, go to the court. You can't be a judge and jury in your own case. No, we will not follow. We have a judicial system. If you had a problem, they instead of going to the courts, they decided to actually, try to be discriminatory against certain people and trying to promote anti-India. And this is all a matter of record. I'm saying with a sense of responsibility. And we don't need a lesson from Jack Dorsey. Certainly not.
Okay.
And look at the interview. It appears to be so manufactured. Look at the kind of question that was asked. If you can replay that question, you will know how this interview was a fixed match.
Journalists, in the defense of journalists, journalists have every right to ask any question that they want to. I don't think we have any right to sit in judgment of what questions should be asked. I would, for example, hate to be told how to do my job as a journalist. Let's please leave that aside. Secondly, when you say, okay, let me come in now. Yes, Jack Dorsey has said on record that, most of us or many of us were left-leaning, but that does not mean that we let our personal biases influence the work that we did at Twitter. Sir, there are many left-leaning people here in India. That does not necessarily make them anti-national. So Jack Dorsey and his team, many of them may have been left-leaning. That does not necessarily make them anti-national. That does not make them, that does not necessarily, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, so that does not necessarily make them anti-India. Also, it is one thing to crack down on Khalistani elements and Twitter handles promoting those kind of activities, but quite another to go after journalists and activists who are either lending support to the protesting farmers or being critical of the government's actions. These are two different things. And, when you tell somebody, we will shut you down, we will shut down your offices, and we will raid your employees, and then that man goes on to mention India, Turkey and Nigeria in the same breath. That I think is embarrassing for India. The fact that we are being mentioned in the same breath as Turkey and Nigeria. We are the world's largest democracies, sir, aren't we?
Let me answer that one by one. How do you take Jack Dorsey's words as gospel truth? Was he raided? No. Was Twitter shut down?
Sir, there are pictures and videos that have been posted by people today of, agencies, their entire teams landing up at the offices of Twitter. Yes, sir, those were raids. There are pictures
Let
and
me,
videos
let
of
me,
those available.
no.
The
They
government
were
can
asked,
say those were not raids, but there are videos available, sir, and they're floating on
let,
Twitter today.
Neha ji, let me educate you with my best ability. Those, when they were not following the law as made by the Indian Parliament, the agencies went them. Obviously, they will go to their office and give them notice. Their notices were handed to them. The agencies went and handed over the notice. The government of India's agencies also went and handed over the notice and also wanted to see their records also because they were not obeying the laws. They refused to post a grievance officer in India. They were leaning on a particular side. And I told you they were making money out of anti-India activities.
Okay, we've
Khalistanis were
heard you,
trying to
sir.
break.
You're
And
repeating
this is a part of
yourself.
record.
My
So
point
therefore,
is, Jack Dorsey has said that, we were asked to block tweets critical of the government. Deshatan Nigam and the government say, we've heard what Rajiv Chandrasekhar has said, that what Jack Dorsey is saying is an outright lie. It is nothing but fiction. It is as if the laws of India were simply not acceptable to Jack Dorsey and the Twitter regime under him. They did not respect the sovereignty of India. There were continuous violations by them and they refused to comply with the law of the land. All that we, the government of India, were trying to do was to crack down on misinformation and fake news, which could have inflamed an already delicate situation. That is the government's defense. But clearly, the remarks made by Jack Dorsey are very, very explosive. And, like I said, he mentions India in the same breath as Turkey and Nigeria and says this is the world's largest democracy that we are talking about. How do you view this controversy? And the government of India accused Jack Dorsey of being a liar.
To hear the Honorable Minister say that we are defending Articles 14, 19 and 21. In my own case, Twitter banned me. I do suspect that it was at the instance of people in the government itself. The rules of Twitter were tweaked to ban my account. When I filed an appeal to Twitter, Twitter didn't restore the account. I had to take them to court. I am certainly no righteous. In fact, if my good friend Mr. Deshratan Nigam will actually classify me as a leftist or an urban naxal, depends on his mood. But the thing is that Twitter began by banning my account. I took them to court. Many of the arguments that I made, I even wrote a letter to the then Minister for Information Technology, Ravi Shankar Prasad, who was a senior advocate, who did nothing. The government in court strongly defended Twitter and said, we have nothing to do with it. That was how they began. 2 years later, they changed their stance in court. They said, no. Twitter has to conform to people's fundamental rights. That was when they had a problem with Twitter. You see, there is a problem with free speech. Speech which is popular does not need any protection. It is unpopular speech which requires the protection of the Constitution. So, Twitter is, to my mind, an equal opportunity offender. It banned my account, it banned many other accounts, some accounts on their own say, and some accounts because somebody told them to. The question of free speech cannot be resolved only by Twitter or any of the platforms and the government. They are not the ultimate arbiters of free speech. The courts are. And not only the courts, I think that there must be an independent regulator for the industry altogether, which is outside the court, which is outside the government. I don't think that what Jack Dorsey said was wrong. He now has no particular reason to have a convenient memory about things which have happened in his old company. He has nothing to do with Twitter anymore. So he speaks of his time in Twitter when he said that it was the Indian government, it was the Nigerian government, it was the Turkish government. All these governments kept on asking for me to take down content. And how do you take down farmers' content? On what grounds? Do you say that they are indulging in pornography or they're indulging in crime? Do you decide? Does the government get to decide that all this is anti-national and we will not allow it? That is not how free speech works.
Kanish Gaur, I want to ask you a larger question. We all concede that fake news is a huge concern in the times that we live in, as is censorship, including in democracies everywhere. Let's face it. Do you believe that the lines between freedom of expression and misinformation on the one hand and crackdown on fake news and censorship by governments on the other have blurred? The lines have completely blurred.
So, Neha, thank you for having me. I think the lines have been blurred, and it's also for the platforms to blame because they come up with their own set of regulations and rules, which they believe are superior to the law of the land. A lot of times you've seen that censorship have been done by platforms with respect to their way, their standards, and not looking at the laws of that particular country. No platform can be above the government, and they must comply with the local laws of the land if they want to continue working in a specific country. We saw that when the intermediary rules were framed by Government of India, they referred Section 69A of the Indian IT Act, basis which 48 hours were given to Twitter for taking down certain news and handles, but they did not comply, or they complied selectively. If Twitter didn't want to comply to this, they could always go to the court and challenge the government. We have courts there, but selectively complying and then crying foul, saying that we were told that you will be banned from the country. I think that's not correct. If there are certain laws created by the government, they could challenge them in the court, but not complying to them and then saying, okay, this is not done in the correct way. I think that's going too far. And now, the ex-CEO bringing these issues after 2 years, I don't know why he's doing it. We have already seen that we have seen so much of work that has happened, and government is coming up with the Digital India Act, the data protection bill, and so there is a lot the government is doing at this point of time. If we want fake news to be curbed, misinformation to be curbed, then platforms and government need to work collaboratively on some of these issues rather than crying foul or putting the blame on each other.